So thanks so much for joining us today, Paul. It's a really exciting time to have you join us. We've got a new huge tranche of polling data to wade through. We've got a full agenda, and we're looking forward to chatting with you today. If anyone's got any questions, if they could put it into the chat function, that would be great, so that I can see those questions. And if that's not working for you, pop them into the Q&A function, and I will see them as well. So let me, and just someone is asking about recording. This is recording, so you'll be able to see this a bit later on today, not very late. We'll put it up as soon as we can. So before we get started, Paul, I've got a few questions, obviously, to sort of kick things off, and I'll get you possibly when we get to the point of going through the data in great detail to share your screen. Obviously, your final MRP polling was released yesterday. Is there a world which shows, very interestingly, a Labor majority government? We'll go through the details in a minute, but is there a world in which this data set could be wrong? Obviously, other polls out in the last 24 hours suggest that there are still around, 30 to 40% of undecided voters.
Um, well, what I would say is that firstly, what this we do is different to a poll. It's a simulation and it's a model. And what that does is that with the 35,000 people that we've spoken to, it runs 25,000 simulations about the range of possibilities. So the model says there's a 97.3% chance of a Labor majority. There is a 2.6% chance of a hung parliament, and there's a 1 in 1,000 chance, 0.1% of a coalition majority. So there are possibilities, but way I'd like to explain that very simply is when something's 50-50, a coin toss, heads one way, tails the other. So if you're having, if you thought the coalition winning an election on our model was a coin toss, then you would have to have you could wait to anything up to 1,000 coin tosses for the right coin to come up. So that's a very, 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 very unlikely scenario. And I will simply say that whilst there are other polls out there, what I would urge people to discount is anything that's in the paper today, which has actually been put out in response to our MRP by both parties, saying, oh, our polling shows something different, without showing the data, without showing the information, because both parties have an interest in having a very close race that's not determined and making sure supporters are very, very active. But what we simply have put out in the public domain is the data which we've collected, which shows that it's a very, 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 a 97% chance of a Labor majority.
So what are those stories that have been put out today?
Oh, well, the Labor Party is after we put out our poll, gave the News Corp a one-page sheet which they wrote down some names of some seats. Said, oh, we might win this and we might not win that, and the coalition have told the Australian that they're going to win 10 seats, but there's no data and there's no information that goes with that. And I'm simply saying that if you're wanting information about the election, you've got to have something which is just has all the information. You can look through it. You can say that looks right. That maybe I don't possibly agree with that, but we put all our data in the public domain. You can go to our website, you can have a look, and we're prepared to be judged on the accuracy of our data because that's our business.
Yeah. Okay. So it obviously, if we consider, I'm going to throw a couple more skeptical questions at you. If we consider the 2019 election result compared to the polls, obviously we saw a result where the betting agencies paid out prior to the election day, and it was wrong. They based their decision to pay out based on polling. It was wrong. Labor didn't win government. What's changed between then and now to both your polling or your research methods and perhaps other polling methods to think that we are now in a world where we have more accurate research data?
Yeah, just to hark back to 2000, the pre-2019 world, that was a time when people were doing a 1,500 person poll and not telling anybody how you calculated your preferences, where your data was from, what time frame it was in, all those sorts of things was accepted.
Yeah.
We now have a polling council, which basically any serious pollster will actually publish their results within a couple of days of which says this is the amount of people we spoke to, this is how we spoke to them, this is the methodology we used, and that allows them scrutiny. And any serious pollster has scrutiny. So we've put our stuff out there. Secondly, what we've actually done is a model, and it's a much larger sample of people, and it is modeled across using sophisticated demographic modeling of the results to each seat, and that is quite a different thing to say. We reckon it's 52-48 from speaking to 1,500 people, so I reckon Labor's going to win, but no more detail.
Had those polls, the methodology of those polls, News Poll, Redbridge, Essential, have they fundamentally changed?
Those pollsters have all adjusted their methodology in various regards, and they're all members of the polling council, and they're all reputable pollsters. There are other pollsters who are not members of the Australian Polling Council, and you don't get disclosed fully their methodology. But that's an interesting point. I would simply say that we have an age of much more scrutiny, much more detail, and the chances of there's always a range of results, and you'll see it if you look at our model. We say there's a range of possibilities. We just think the realistic range is between 76 and 86, and that and all of those ranges fall within that's 76. The worst is the realistic worst case scenario for Labor. There's a possibility, a 2% chance that it might be even slightly worse than that. But there is for the coalition to win the amount of seats they need, 76 to actually form majority government is, statistically 1 in 1,000 is pretty hard.
So that's a lot of two-up games then, is it?
Think of it that, except that, for the election, Australia has an election, doesn't have a two-up game every 1 minute. It has an election every 3 years. So at 1,001, you could be waiting 3,000 years for that type of unusual answer from the Australian public.
That's a good way of. I like your thinking. It's an interesting way of putting it.
So we have taken a bet that it's not a 1 in 3,000 year result tomorrow by putting out our data, but we're pretty confident that there will be certain seats which we said were a 50.5% chance it would go Labor, but turn out to be going Liberal because campaigns win elections.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get to the campaign in just 2 seconds. I've got a question for you on that. One of the things I do want to talk about though is the last time we spoke to you just a few weeks ago, just early on in the campaign, you were predicting a Labor victory, but a much slimmer one.
Yeah.
What's changed in this set of results or this set of research data? What have you seen from what people have said to you?
Well, it's good to actually probably tell the story over the course of the campaign because we've done 3 MRPs. And the very first one, just to recap, had the coalition in the box seat. They were just short. The average result was just short of majority, 73. There was scenarios where they could have got to a majority, but they're in a position which, with a few favourable independents, could form government. What happened in between those two things was the coalition released their work from home policy or anti-work from home policy and the cuts to public service. These were dramatic. These already started to dramatically impact the voters where they had a lead. In our first MRP, you would see that outer suburban voters, outer suburban seats were disproportionately starting to favour the coalition. That had already started to change by our last poll. And what we've had is a trend over the course of the election for voters in outer suburban and provincial seats that in February the coalition were winning 3 out of 4 seats of the Hunter seats in Western Sydney and outer suburban Melbourne, start to come back to or drift away from the coalition is probably the better way of putting it. And then what we've seen in the course of the last 4 weeks since then is the situation getting worse for the coalition. The driving factor has been the growing unpopularity of Peter Dutton. He started the campaign with a personal rating of -2. He's now finishing the campaign with a net satisfaction rating of -18. This impacts.
What does that represent? Talk to us.
For example, he would currently he would be 54% of Australians would say they have a negative view of him, and 36% will have a positive view. So you subtract one from the other, and and that means it's -18. Whereas before he was fairly even. Now, and in polling terms, the reason why people ask this question is the Prime Minister also has a negative rating, but it's a negative rating of -7. 49% of people don't have a negative view of him. 42% have a positive view. That's not unusual for a politician to have a slightly negative rating. But in polling terms, if more than 50% of the population have a negative view of you and less than 40% have a positive view, in polling methodology and campaign planning terms, that's the death zone in terms of it's such a big gap, particularly compared to your opponent.
Yes.
And if I can go into the preferred Prime Minister just for a second over the course of the campaign, where it started was that the preferred Prime Minister in our poll on February the 28th, we did tracking polling every week for the election, which we've put in the public domain, was the preferred Prime Minister was Anthony Albanese by 42 to 40. Now, actually, that's a dead heat because no matter how you ask the question, about 2% of the population think who is the Prime Minister is the question they're answering, rather than who would you prefer. That's blown out in the course of to 50% is for Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and 35% for Peter Dutton. Now that's a big change, and it's particularly important because actually in this election, 60% of us, only 40% of us, about 35% of Australians will vote for a party that is not one of the majors. Or
35%, you're saying?
Yeah, about 35. It could be even slightly higher than that, but it definitely will be a figure of that amount. And those people have to give their preferences. So where those people live is also very important, and the demographic breakdown. At the start of the campaign, the Prime Minister was only the preferred Prime Minister of people who live in inner metropolitan Australia and women. There are 4 types of seats: outer metropolitan, inner metropolitan, provincial and rural, as defined by the Australian Electoral Commission. And what we have seen is a dramatic change in which the Prime Minister is now the preferred Prime Minister in outer metropolitan Sydney by 54 points to 36. That is actually a bigger gain than compared to any other area. The Prime Minister now leads in rural electorates and provincial electorates as the preferred.
He leads all over the country.
And he leads all over in terms of all over the country and amongst men. So he was, Peter Dutton had a +6 rating amongst men. Now he has a -9. So basically everybody has changed.
It's going to shift across all demographics, which accounts for your...
Particularly the model is that the most sensitive parts of the model, even when we had a second model come out in February, and even though Labor had only gained 1.3% across the country, the work from home and had a particular impact in the outer metropolitan seats that decided the election. So Labor already came back from being 60 seats in February to an average of 75, just 1 seat sort of majority, because all those people feel that is Working from home is supported by 80% of people as a right, and even higher in those electorates.
So that's been a fundamental shift.
Fundamental.
Two questions just on that before we go to the specific results of your research, this latest tranche. A lot of polls are still talking about undecided voters. You're saying that there are 35% of people who are going to vote for a party other than the main parties. Are you seeing in your latest set of results a group of people who are undecided?
Oh, they're undecided about who they'll vote for, but there's about 53, 54% of Australians who are clearly decided who they're voting against. So they might know who their number one is, but they're going to, however they number their ballot paper, they'll be putting Dutton lower than Labor and
How
Albanese.
many people are yet to engage or yet to make up their mind
I
and
think,
not fall in that camp, not fall in the we know who we're not going to vote for? Who are the people who haven't
yeah, there are a lot of
considered
people
at
who,
all their option?
I think they actually, people often misunderstand soft voters, particularly in this election context. In this election context, it's not, am I voting Labor or am I voting Liberal? It is, I haven't quite decided who I'm voting for. I might vote Green or One Nation or legalise cannabis or Labor, or Family First. But I don't like that Peter Dutton, so that he's getting my number 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Well, he's getting a number which will be below Labor, and that's the
Yeah.
crucial part of the electoral system.
Is there a figure? Is there a figure of people who just haven't? You can't even define them as that. They've not actually engaged at all
we
and are
what
in the completely undecided category.
Yeah, people were, we changed our polling method in the election campaign because what we want to find out is what people will do when they've got to make a choice. Because that's the only way you can find out the election. We would typically get 6 or 7 or 8% of people saying they don't know.
Yeah.
So we gave them their ballot paper. This is the people, these are
Yeah.
the names, these are the parties, this is how they're ordered. You don't get a don't know option. You've got to choose. So we've been focusing on finding out how those people run. And
Yeah. Okay.
what we find out
So
is
you're
that
not allowing them. You are forcing them in the clear light of day to have to make a decision like they will do at some point between now and 6 p.m. tomorrow.
that's right, because you that's the only way to get a clear result is to
Yeah,
actually give them
understand.
the choice. So it may be a very
Yeah.
weakly based choice.
Yeah. So you are what you're doing then is having a better understanding of that pool of soft, undecided, unengaged, whatever it is, voters, right? You're able to put them somewhere.
And by getting a big group of them, because if, say, for instance, out of 35,000 people we've interviewed in our last poll using this method, and perhaps 3,000, 500 of those might have said undecided or don't know at some point in the past. Now we just know where they fall. And the where they're falling is that a very significant number of people, we will probably see at this election more Australians put their number one next to a candidate who's not from the two majors, but
And yeah, yeah,
but they will choose
yeah.
but the preferences will on preferences the Labor Party will do better.
So for that group, are you able to identify what this sort of pool that everyone is talking about of these undecided, whoever soft voters are? Are you able to say how they're splitting up,
Well,
how
the different vote, obviously, there are different preference flows, and what we do is we actually put out there our preference flows as well because we're very transparent. And what we'll see in this election is that and it's also interesting to look at it in terms of what people did last time.
Mm.
Um, in this election, about 80 to 81% of people who vote Green will preference Labor. That's slightly down on last time. One Nation, who will get probably the best result in a number of decades, this election, their vote will be more to the coalition than last time because in 2022, 62% of people preference the coalition. We're just doing our final tabulation now, but we think it's going to be about 73, 74. There have been some reports in the paper that, in fact, it's going to be some polling, which no one can see, says that it'll save the Liberal Party because they'll get 90% of those preferences. That won't happen because, as I said in the last election, it was 62% of One Nation voters did that. It will be higher this time, but it won't be as high as I've seen some
19.
reports.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Just a couple more questions before we get into the results themselves. And if anyone, when we do get into the results part of the discussion, have any questions, then please pop them in the chat or the Q&A box. What sort of, obviously you've done 3 really large tranches of research across this election, really big groups of people. What impact do you think the campaign has had?
The campaign has had enormous impact. And I know I've mentioned before, but there's been 3 stages to this campaign, which the public don't follow all the ins and outs. They've got better things to do in their lives. But there's 3 things that the public have picked up from the campaign, and they've all been, to some extent, self-inflicted wounds by the coalition. So this is a campaign where it's been the coalition's mistakes or misunderstandings in the Australian public that have determined the result of the election. The
Yeah,
first has been the decision to basically adopt the Trump policies in relation to work from home and the Doge-style cuts to the public servants. This is actually extremely poorly received by Australians. I've discussed this before, but it basically, in the course of the campaign, for polling is throughout government is usually a referendum on the government. That means that for the entire period of the election campaign, do you like the government, yes or no? And then when the election campaign starts, the public will turn and have a look at the alternative. And it was precisely at that time that they put out that policy, and it got the public's attention, and not in a good way. This is one of those things where it was far more discussed in people's personal lives and people's social media than probably discussed in the media initially, because it has a real impact on people, and it reinforced a brand problem the coalition has about being not on your people's side at work. Different parties have different brand strengths. The coalition have not decided to emphasise one of their brand strengths this election, which is we're good with money. I mean, they only announced their costings yesterday. They probably should have been banging the drum for 6 weeks about what their economic policy is, but they've chosen or not played to their strengths. The second thing is that they've linked themselves to Trump in a way which is at a time when he's associated with global financial instability and attacking Australia's trade interests. And this has been a bad thing for them. And the third thing is that the nature of the campaign that they've run, which just Australians don't follow the ins and outs, but it does look like you're kind of making it up as you're going along. You just look like a risk. And Australians, in a time of global financial uncertainty, where people are kind of worried, we found that 7 out of 10 Australians think that Donald Trump will make them worse off financially. And that means that he's associated with risk. They're associated with risk. So basically, the public have picked up, you're not on my side at work. You're sort of associated with somebody I don't like, and you look like a risk. That's the campaign effect outcome. It's all been negative, self-inflicted wounds by the coalition. The Labor Party just ran a normal campaign, which, whilst having some positive offers, it's the public's attention has been focused on the coalition, and because they're looking at the coalition, the more they look, the more they've seen other things they don't like, and that explains the negative slide in Dutton's personal popularity and the coalition primary vote.
Indeed, indeed. Look, we might now turn to the results themselves. I've let you share your screen if you're able to do that. I'll stop sharing mine. Hopefully you can share your screen.
Okay, let's do my share screen. Okay, so what we've done is that we've done a release this yesterday. You can look it on our website, yougov.eu Australian election. Just Google that, or you Google MRP. And what we've done is we've run through the results of what the likely results are. And what we think is the most likely result of the election is right across the top there in terms of the seats, which is 84, 47, 14 independents, 3 Greens, and the Centre Alliance and CAP. So you've got a crossbench there, which would be the largest crossbench in Australian history at least in modern two-party preferred times since 1910, of 19 seats. The result, there are a number of, if this is kind of a play, and we certainly think this type of result, we're not, this is a model, so therefore one seat that we've got is 49% chance can turn one way and one can go the other. But when you've got so many seats that are in a narrow cone of being 1 or 2% the other way, it's about how the coin tosses go and the campaigns go, and what the range is. And I'll go through the ranges in a minute. But the top level outcome is that Labor has never, a Labor majority government in the history of Australia has never increased its number of seats at the second election in Australian history at a federal level. That is what will happen, a very good chance, on Saturday night, and it is almost certain. They only got 77 now, and it is almost certain that that the range will be between 76 and 86. The coalition, our central projection is 47 for them. There's 150 seats in the parliament. That's less than a third. Even a better case scenario for them. Remember, they got 58 last time. 58 was their worst performance ever. So the chances of the election coming out with the worst number of seats for the coalition is extraordinarily high, even if they just go one down. What we're projecting would be the realistic outcomes is this the worst election result for them in terms of seats since 1946? Or is it the worst one since 1943, which was the worst result and the best result for the Labor Party in Australian parliamentary history? What's extraordinary about that is the Labor Party could get one of its best results ever in terms of seats off the basis of one of the lowest primary votes it's ever got, and that's because of the nature of the system. Means that in other elections we had a highly polarized electorate, in which you might find that 95% of people in 1946 voted for one party or the other, whereas the ability for people to shift the result with their preferences is far higher when 35% of Australians are not voting for a party first. It's the drop in the coalition primary vote, which opens them up to all sorts of weakness, and the lack of, they will get preferences off One Nation, and One Nation will get a good result. If I just go to the top line, I should have mentioned that this is our top line result in terms of what we see the primary vote being currently. You can see that the Greens will get a slightly higher result than last time. One Nation will get a at this stage, the best result this century. I'll put a caveat to that. The caveat has been that One Nation is the only minor party that has, apart from the Greens, that has a candidate in just about every electorate. They've got a candidate 147 out of 150. And that means that when people get the ballot paper we gave them, or the online ballot paper, you might have been thinking, I'll vote for an independent or some other minor party, and then they're not there. So they're a little bit of a default option. I think they might be a fraction lower than that on election night, so because they don't have people at polling stations, they don't have people might turn up and suddenly decide they want to vote for somebody else. A lot of people are very lightly committed to One Nation, and they're possibly voting as a don't know option. or none of the above option. And that also means that the parties on election day can do a bit better than this because they
Yes.
will have people at polling stations. But the trend is very clear, and you'll have a fairly diverse primary vote, but you will have a two-party preferred vote, which is like this. And I've just noticed the numbers here the wrong way around, but it should be a swing to Labor of 0.7. And that's only slightly better than last time. But what it is about where those seats are, and it's the key seats where the coalition will hold on to a whole range of seats across Australia. If you look at the electorates that we've got here, you see this great sea of blue for the coalition, but it's outside metropolitan, and where this is won and lost is in metropolitan
Yes.
Sydney and Melbourne. And so what I will do is that I will go back
Yeah.
to this and
It sort of turns us, segues us nicely to sort of look at perhaps the specific breakdowns of where the seats are going to move, unless there's something else that you wanted to talk about.
no, I'll go right into the seats
Yeah.
because I think that tells the story and where the coalition is in trouble.
Yeah.
Um,
Before Paul gets to that, James, I see you've asked a question whether or not we think if there's only a 0.1% chance of a coalition majority, do you think there'd be a challenge to Peter Dutton? I absolutely think there would be. I'm not sure that there's any world in which the coalition would potentially remain with the leader.
Well, his
Really?
challenge is to hold his seat.
Yeah.
We think that it's fractionally more likely that he'll hold it than not. But what has
Yeah.
happened is the potential for him losing his seat was 0 on our model in February. It was 5% in March, and I think it's 45% now.
Mm.
Like that's if it was 20 coin tosses, he wins 11 out of 20. It's not like an enormously confident situation for him
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
it well.
So look, to answer your question, James, I think there probably would be a challenge, but I'm not a member of the coalition frontman. So what I think is more interesting is if these figures are in any way accurate, it's a very big number of seats that the coalition needs to win at the next election to place them even into a minority government, sort of close to 30 seats, and that's a lot of seats to win. So
So, and I guess it's also about who would challenge, and that's probably a segue back into here. So, for instance, if you look at a seat like Deakin is currently held by a coalition frontbencher, Michael Sukkar, on a very tight margin. That would go. Keith Menzies is held by Keith Woolahan.
So
But
these are the seats that you think Labor are going to pick up.
and what I would simply say here is, as you can see by looking at the primary vote here, and you can go into the cards and look at the two-party preferred calculation. And if you really want to get the full data, you can download the full data set off our website as well, because we're very transparent, which has the chances of winning. This is like a tiny chance of, a 51% chance that Labor will win this. But
Which
it's
one?
more
This
like
is Menzies. Yeah. Okay.
Menzies. But I'd rather be at 51% than 49. And
Yeah.
the way this works, if there's 20 seats that are in a range of 2%, then what the system works out is who is the most likely. And because essentially 18 of the 20 that are up for grabs are in the coalition column, or the ones they would want to win, it makes it so much more likely. So we'll simply say these are some of the seats that
Do
they
you
will
think
take.
Labor's going to pick up?
We think that this is a one to look out for on election
Yeah.
night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas, say, for
On
instance,
your bingo card, you need to have this on your.
yeah, we'll go for the bingo card. Think about this one. Look out for this one early. This is the sort of seat that we had the coalition as winning back in February and in March, which is McEwen out of suburban marginal. It's the type of seat that's moved back. And what you can see there is the Labor Party was losing that seat in February and in March, and now they're in front on primaries. That tells you the story. So that's kind of the seats. If you want to go up your sort of classic outer suburban seats, what we can see here is Eden Monaro. Labor were losing Eden Monaro in February. They're now going to win that. As you can see, they're comfortably ahead on primaries. I know it's your part of the world, Joe, but what I would simply
Sure.
say is that one factor here is that outside of the three Canberra electorates, Eden Monaro has the highest number of public sector workers of any electorate in the country. Um, and also one of the highest numbers of people working from home. Eden Monaro has traditionally been a bellwether seat, and between 1972 and 2016 went with the government of the day in every election.
Mm.
So this is again the case of not targeting your policies well to the electorate that you're looking to win.
And interestingly, the exclusive brethren have been handing out how to votes for the Liberal Party in the last few days in Goulburn in that seat. So
Um, Gilmore here, we have Labor Party losing the seat, both
you got
things.
them losing it, do you?
We had them losing it
Oh, you've now
last
got it.
term, and now it's moved in front. This is a seat which was the most marginal Labor win in the and we think Labor's got their nose in front here. If you want to go up to Western Sydney, um,
I've
where
got a question from someone about Tasmania, so we'll go down to Tasmania eventually when you finish
we'll
the
come
answer.
to Tassie.
Yeah.
Tassie's the most interesting.
Yeah.
Tassie's
Yeah.
got the wild cards.
Yeah, and that's what
Yep.
someone's asking me about that. So we'll
Well,
go.
I'll come to the wild
Let's go
cards.
through the others, the ones that you think
The more
Labor.
the classic seat, we'll do the classics, and then we'll go to the wild cards because
Yeah.
everywhere in Tassie's a wild card. Um,
That's
where
your answer to the person that's asked me that question, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we had Labor
Alright.
winning Werriwa. Sorry, the coalition's winning Werriwa in both the last polls. This is Gough Whitlam's old seat. Used to win by 70%. Labor's back in front there on the primaries,
All right.
and they were losing it. They were losing it 4 weeks ago. And this is a seat where we did some work for the ABC, in which we polled 7 Western Sydney seats on work from home, and 80% of people supported a general right to work from home. But on small numbers, with a slight health warning, Werriwa had the highest support of any seat of the 7 seats we polled, on 89% supporting a right to work from home. So the coalition launched their election campaign in Werriwa, and the policy didn't match the people. It just didn't match them. The seat which I would look out for most on election night is Robertson. Robertson's on the Central Coast. It is the classic seat.
Meryl Swanson is the sitting member.
No, Merrill's in Patterson.
Actually, I'm sorry, no, that's Dr. Gordon Reid. Sorry.
You are right, Dr. Gordon Reid. I would. This is where I'd look to on election night. Candidly, if it's going to be a minority government, which is a chance, then it's because Labor's losing in Robertson. It's Lucy Wicks is recontesting there for the Liberal Party. She lost the election there last time. She has a real. It's a close front seat, and it will be interesting to watch. But we've got Labor. We had Labor losing the last 2 MRPs, and now it's in front. If you go up the Central Coast, to the Hunter, just a brief tour. In our first MRP, we had Labor winning Patterson, the coalition winning Patterson, Hunter, and Shortland. So 3 of the 4 seats. Now Labor's comfortably in front, though. What we'll see there will be interesting is there is a very outside chance that One Nation could make it into second place there. They got very close in 2019. It's one of about 2 or 3 seats where they might get to second. They won't win anywhere, but they might, if all the preference flows from the large amount of non-traditional parties that are contesting there, including the leader of Trumpets and Patriots, who will not do well. They will not do very well this election at all. We'll see how that goes. What I'll do is that if you go up to
Queensland?
we'll go to Queensland because we don't see much change in Queensland, but there are a couple of things that are important. We have got the Greens. We are now holding 2 of their 3 seats, Ryan and Griffith, but Labor winning Brisbane back. And
So
it's
Stephen Bates would
Stephen
lose the
Bates is
seat
the
to Labor.
current Green member. The reason for that is because of the change in the order. Was a three-cornered seat in which Stephen Bates managed to get into front of Labor. We now think Labor is going to do quite well in that seat, but more importantly, the coalition is going to do quite badly. And that seat will end up being a contest, though, between Labor and the coalition, in which the coalition, the Green preferences will push Labor over the line. The two other seats, the other two, and the only other two, we've got two other seats in play in Queensland. And the one, I'll do Bonner first. We think there is just a whisker of a chance Labor will win it. This is one of the finest tuned ones. This is 50% 0.01 to Labor. Labor hasn't held this seat for since the 2007 election when they won it. But it's a real toss-up. But it's a slightly more in a metropolitan part of the electorate is slightly more in a metropolitan, and there's been a particular shift of voters, particularly that electorate has a higher education rate than the average in Queensland, and that is factors that have played a slightly more disproportionate drift towards Labor in the election, and the MRP has the sensitivity to pick that up. Whereas the one that everyone is interested in is Dixon. This is going to be very close. It could go either way, but we are modelling that the coalition will 11 times out of 20 win this. And that's a real balance. The Liberal opposition is back in his own electorate, campaigning there today because he needs to. And I would simply say that this will come down to preferences. And the two factors to watch are Labor will come second and the coalition will come first. And what happens with the independent and One Nation preferences. What Labor needs is a high flow of preferences from the independent, who is handing out what's called an open ticket. That means that her how to vote card doesn't say vote to Labor, it says you pick. And the coalition have got the One Nation and the other smaller right-wing parties are giving them a high preference on their how to vote cards, and because they know they need those which are a smaller number. The One Nation is a smaller number than the independent to give them that extra bit to get over the line. Peter Dutton is highly reliant on One Nation preferences to win. He needs a high flow of One Nation preferences to win. We think he probably will just get there, but it'll be a close run thing. It's all about the campaign on the ground now. It's about who has people at polling stations, who has people handing out cards. It will be that sort of election, and it'll be an interesting one to watch on the night. Just briefly, I'll go to the other states very, very quickly.
Keep going. Yes, absolutely.
Very quickly.
People are on the edge of their seats. I am anyway.
Sturt, basically, Labor already won. Where is it? Boothby in the last election. That was a pickup. Labor had never held Boothby for the last 40 years, and they picked up Boothby last time, and they will hold that fairly comfortably on preferences. But the one which is we're predicting as a win is Sturt. Sturt, and that would mean that every metropolitan seat in Adelaide is held by that. It will be a close run thing on preferences. You can see the coalition is in front. Christopher Pine used to be the former member for Sturt, and he was on TV last night saying, his former staff, he's the MP, he's still a good chance.
Yeah, he actually said my seat. He sort of referred to himself as the MP. It was quite cute.
Yes. He obviously has a great affection both for the electorate and his former member of staff. But it's not we don't think so. We think the Labor will just get there. and they weren't going to win that seat 4 weeks ago. Like, they were a long way out. It's a sort of seat that's actually moved really a lot, and it's the Dutton factor in that electorate. Highly educated, middle class, suburban seat. And the ones to watch in Western Australia, in case the result is still close, Bullwinkle will be the most fascinating outer suburban contest. We think that Labor will win that, but you've got to understand that in the other column there is the National Party candidate, Mia Davies, and she will get about 8%, and the number and her preference flow will be important in that seat. Previously, the Nationals have got about 80% preference flow to the Liberals. Of course, the Western Australian Nationals are different. They're not part of the coalition agreement. That will be an interesting one to play for. And that will be, that's one to look out for there. So I'm going to go to Tassie now, because I know people want to know about Tasmania. And because actually it's got 4 of the hardest seats to pick in the country out of 5. That's the easy one is pretty simple. Independent will win Clark. The independent down there is well established. He's very popular. He will win that easily. Then in Lions, we think that, firstly, something about all the Tasmanian seats, just as a general rule. Firstly, they're actually got a smaller population by about a third, because under the Constitution, Tasmania must have 5 seats. But they don't have the population for 5 seats, but they've got them anyway. So their electorates are about 25% to 30% smaller. That means and also they're very geographically discrete. And that means somebody, particularly in seats like Lyon and Braddon and Bass, the local candidate really matters. In Lyons, the local Labor has replaced its local candidate, and it's now Rebecca White, who led the party in government, in opposition there. And in the state election, because the voting system is under Hare Clark, you vote for the candidate and not the person. Top the poll in that seat when she ran as the candidate. Even when the Liberals got more votes, she got the strongest personal vote, and that will be a deciding. We've mapped that and when our polling against the Senate vote, and she is a long way ahead of the Senate vote.
Yeah, the question that I had about Tasmania was that you have the coalition winning the 2-party preferred vote on your website, but the model also predicts Labor to win these seats. So is that can you talk to that, or is that is that a wrong understanding? Sorry.
I'm quite Labor with the 2-party preferred.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that person means.
I'll just talk through what it is, and
just talk us through those seats.
Sorry. Yeah, I think the seats, the story is important for each of them have their own story. The seat that we think we had to sort of pitch ourselves about, because whilst it's possible, you kind of go, really, is Braddon. We think the Labor is in a position to win Braddon. The story is that, firstly, just a little bit about Braddon. People don't know it's a working class seat with regional working people who are employed in all sorts of industries that are related to extractive work, and it's a very low income electorate. And was held by Labor in 2016 and won in a by-election in 2018 by Labor, but it's been held by the Liberal Member of Parliament Chris Pearce since 2019. He's retiring.
No.
Votes in this sort of area are very personal. And also candidates matter. In the last election, Labor had a candidate whose previous convictions for drug trafficking became an issue in the last 2 weeks of the campaign, and Labor recorded one of its most significant falls in primary vote across the country in that seat. This election, the Liberal candidate has been embroiled in 2 controversies. One about he basically told the local paper that he was I struggle to pay the bills. I have to think about things when I go to the supermarket. Sometimes I don't buy all the food I want to eat. Uh, and then it turned out he owned 4 houses in the electorate, and that's kind of gone down fairly badly in a fairly low income electorate.
Yeah.
And then secondly, in the course of this week, he's come out and said that people should be paid to work for $10 an hour. And that will sort all this out after the election, which has kind of been a major own goal for the coalition, but a significant one in a low paid electorate.
Yeah.
And Labor has nominated Anne Urquhart, who's a sitting Labor Party senator. So they've got a strong campaign. The member of the Prime Minister, I think, has visited the electorate 3 times in the last 6 months. So that's two in the election period. Prime Ministerial time is scarce to get in the diary. It'll be interesting. I think I could bet my bottom dollar there'll be a significant swing towards Labor in this election.
Mm.
They'll win. We'll see. It's one to watch. It's probably the one I'm looking at going, all right, okay, you really?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Can we any other ones there? Because I'm keen to also go through the where the independents are going to be winning and losing seats,
well,
or
perhaps
not.
I'll
You don't
start
think
with
they're going to lose seats, I don't think, but you think they're
no.
going to pick up some.
But
So
I'll go
let's just
through where to
finish.
win. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll start with Franklin because Franklin's actually, we have as a Labor win, but we think the independent there has a real chance of getting to second place. In fact, our model, if just so people understand, Franklin's on the east coast of Tasmania. It's kind of got partly outer suburban parts of Hobart, like Bellerive, and then goes a little bit into the sort of
Mm.
green beachy areas outside, which have suffered significantly from salmon. Um, uh, Whatever's coming up on the beaches, it's made people there very angry
Yeah.
against the commercial salmon industry. And there's a candidate running there, and because the Green candidate has had to effectively withdraw, um, they have a real chance of getting on past the Liberal Party candidate. And then if they do, they would be able to possibly run down the Labor minister. The reason why our machine doesn't say they will is because the Liberal Party is giving their preferences to Labor in that seat ahead of the independent, which is not what they normally do. And therefore we've factored in the Liberal Party preferences. But if the people who vote Liberal decide to vote for the independent because they don't like Labor or they don't like the salmon industry, then that's the number one chance for a bolter that we haven't called. So I think that's
Yeah.
important to
Cool.
mention. The places we think that the independent's going to win that are new, Wannon, Alex Dyson's the candidate there. We think they'll pick that up.
I saw him yesterday on ABC 24, and he's very, very slick, actually. So yeah.
Well, he's got that background in media, and
Yeah. This is the third time he's run.
he's run third 3 times. He's got the hang of it. He's got a impressive campaign machine. He is polling well locally, and we think that he's going to actually do very, very well. The one that's a bit of a bolter is Monash, but also the risk with Monash is that there's 2 independent candidates, and they might not be preferencing each other. I believe that one of them is the former retired Liberal member Russell Broadbent, and we think he's got a chance of getting there. But it
Getting
depends,
back in.
getting back in. But it
Yeah,
all
you're
depends on.
sitting on the crossbench then.
But it could be. It could go to the other independent. This is a situation where there's about 4 different possibilities, and the reality is that the independent winning is a 26% chance, but just higher than all the others. And this one is going to be the most convoluted dog fight in the entire, because there is
One to
one
watch
to watch.
tonight, everyone. Yeah.
This is the one which the system had the most trouble kind of work out. But we will see.
Scrutineers are going to have their work cut out for them tomorrow night.
They will, yeah, the scrutineers will be calling around people in West Gippsland, which is kind of this area, is considering what's going on at this seat. We think Claire will come back as effectively as Andrew G, but as an independent. We think that they'll win Cowper. Cowper will be with the Kaz Heiss. We think that if you go to the North Shore, we think that Bradfield will also go independent. So the changes to independent.
Yeah.
So the system, I know you had questions last time about the system, how and does it pick up independence? Because
And I've got a question from Tara Kuyong. You've got staying with Monique Ryan? Or?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So none of the current independents on
We
your.
think the one most at risk is
Yeah.
actually Lee.
Right. Okay.
Lee is
And
a very
let's just zoom into that because I'm interested in that actually. It's an interesting contest
yeah.
to see how voters see Labor putting in the person that they could have pre-selected last time but didn't.
We're actually about to do a recast of our figures there because we've got what's on our website we think is needs a bit of a
And what have you got? You've predicted
we think it's a little bit high for
but,
Lee, so we've got some more data.
yeah.
In reality, we think that Lee is slightly favoured, but
Okay.
not by very much.
Yeah.
And it's a very hard electoral poll because of the demographic factors there. But we think that what will be decisive there is that it'll be about preferences again, because in that seat, Labor will finish first.
Yeah.
And the independent will probably finish second. But then it's about the three different categories of independents or other candidates. The Greens, who are preferably
Can we
Labor.
Can we zoom into if you're able to zoom into?
No, I'm going to update that, so I'm going to just tell you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The accurate
You don't want
information.
people to see the data as it is because it's, I understand.
Yeah, we've got some new data. So
Yeah.
you're getting exclusive. We're simply saying that Greens will actually, the Green preference flows, they're putting Labor number 2.
Right.
Normally in an election, you would model that the Greens would tend to float to an independent rather than the two majors. But Lee is seen increasingly as a potential vote for Peter Dutton in a hung parliament situation, which is not a good fit for that electorate. And that's a factor. The Liberal candidate who has had, can I say, just difficulties this week, that's how I'll put it. His preferences will need to boost Lee significantly, and his campaign is faltering a little bit. And then it'll come down to the One Nation and other party preferences, and they may be decisive in terms of if the Labor Party has the Green preferences and they flow, and that's all about campaign organisation. Do the Greens have people handing out their how to votes? Our model can't tell you that.
Exactly.
It's all about the data. This one is one that's going to be about campaign organisation on the day. Is the faltering Liberal campaign going to actually have it there to have the people on to hand out their how to votes to help get Lee over the line? I would say that leaving aside all those personal factors, it is a situation where Lee probably will edge it. But it's everything to play for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one other one question on Lingiari. It was a marginal seat in some of your previous data, and you've got Labor winning it. It looks to be safer now.
Yes. I wouldn't have any concerns about Lingiari from a Labor point of view. It is a seat which can, because of the diverse nature of the community, one factor which is more important than Lingiari than any other part of the country's turnout, particularly from Aboriginal and remote communities. But I think the word on the ground is that the Labor's doing a better job on that than they did last election, and they paid special attention to that. And as long as that is the turnout, because Australians turn out for compulsory voting, but rural and so remote communities and who vote by special voting, like the polling place actually travels around in the Northern Territory. It's not in what they come to you, or at least within 100 miles of where you are, to sort of get your vote. Subject to that all working, I think that Labor will hold Lingiari.
Yeah, no, good, interesting. I've got a question here about if the coalition loses, will Peter Dutton retire as opposition leader, or I'm not sure whether you meant from Parliament or as opposition leader. We don't know what's in the opposition leader's head in terms of how he will respond to what the results look like tomorrow night. By 9 o'clock or whatever time, or whatever time he might choose to stand up and speak. But you would think that if the sort of results that Paul is talking about today are perhaps what we see, then you would think that he might do that. Will he retire from Parliament? I've heard thoughts about that. I don't think he would do that, because if he wins a seat and he then goes to a by-election at whatever time that he does that, it's probably fairly likely that they'd lose that seat in a by-election. So I don't think he'd retire from Parliament probably in the next term, but you never know. So Paul, one of the things, I know we're a little bit over, but we started a little bit late, so that's fine. And we've still got sort of 60, 70 people. We've got 70 people on the line. So people are keen to hear what you've got to say. Obviously, just a few weeks ago, we were talking about minority government as an option. People are still saying that. Some of the other pollsters, this data is not saying that. Other pollsters are saying majority government as well. So, we're all sort of moving into that sort of space. What do you think's changed? What's the key factors that have moved people?
Dutton is a risk. I can't afford a risk. Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's a good answer. Thank you. And what, in terms of, one of the things that's interesting, and I heard someone during the week talk about the Canadian result being the biggest turnaround in any poll in modern history, or results in terms of where it was a few months ago to what happened on the night of the Canadian election. Is this change in support from your first tranche to what might be what we see tomorrow night the biggest change in polls in Australia's history?
It's certainly the biggest change since the 1993 election, and it has
Mm.
some enormous parallels and one important difference. People recall the 1993 federal election, where Labor came from behind in the last week or two of the campaign, having trailed for 2 years, to when Houston bought the Fight Back project, which, for those who don't know, had a 15% GST, cuts to Medicare, and change loss of rights work for workers. The Keating government was enormously unpopular, but it turned around because Keating really, really destroyed Houston in the fight back and make them a risk. And people turned around and you saw a 5.5% increase in the Labor vote over the previous election with Bob Hawke. That's the primary vote. And Labor got its best result in that election, the best result they've had since 1993. It was an enormous turnaround, but it was done because Keating destroyed Houston. I guess what's happened in this election, you had also quite a dramatic change. I mean, the difference between 73 seats and a number that's 48, 50, whatever it might turn out to be, is like losing a third of what you potentially would have got only 6 weeks ago, is an enormous change. But it's been powered almost entirely by coalition's self-destruction. It's not been the Labor Party's point out this is your policy problem, this policy problems. They've basically done the three things that I said. It's the work from home, it's the link with Trump, it's looking just unstable and disorganized and a risk.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And in terms of, when you see the data changing in this way, as you said before, quickly, and it's a sort of the fastest, largest change that you'd seen in a long time, or had happened in a long time. Do you start to doubt the data? How are you confident that what you're looking at is real?
Yeah, you go, you got to check that. And what we have an advantage of is that you think, have I got the wrong sample? Have I got a lot of people who suddenly vote Labor or vote Green or a different
Mm.
vote coalition? And what we have an advantage of is is that we have the record. People have told us how they voted who were on our panel before. So you kind of go, what did these people do last time? And it's kind of like, well, this person voted coalition in 2022, and now they're voting One Nation, and they're preferencing Labor. That's because you go through and you check the data, and you kind of go. Sometimes when you get things that make you kind of fall over, like the
Yeah.
last week, we were surprised to see One Nation with a 10 in front of it. It won't be that on the night, but but it's because those people were coalition voters who have decided, yeah, I really rate Dutton negatively, and I've kind of fallen off the wagon for
Mm.
as a coalition inclined voter.
Mm.
So therefore, when you get something that's unexpected, you say you've not just had the one conversation with them, you've had lots of conversations over a long period of time, and you've got all that information about how they voted on the voice referendum, how they voted on the last federal election, the other interactions, and it's not just a bleep or the wrong data or the wrong people. It's a genuine change. And that's one of the reasons why we knew such a genuine change over work from home. It was just like 2% change, but it was a real change that lined up with um, previous opinions.
Interesting. So what's today and tomorrow and over the weekend look like for you, Govern yourself? What will you be doing in terms of your work?
I'll be putting forward our final analysis about why people voted the way they have, which I'm literally just about to start looking at after this call. I'll be preparing for, I'm going on Channel 10 be part of their election panel just to talk through that. And yeah, that's my next 24 hours.
And next week you probably have a of reflection, or will you do an analysis of the results? What will you be doing?
Well, we'll do a couple of things. We will. I will hope to get a little bit more rest. But what I would say is that one of the things we do is that straight after the election, we ask everyone at our panel how they voted this time,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's fresh in their mind, because that way we know. People's recollection of what they did 12 months after the election is kind of a bit faulty.
Yeah.
And surely I didn't vote for this person I dislike. But in fact, you did.
Yeah.
And so we try and capture the choice within a couple of days afterwards. So that's a
Yeah.
priority for us.
Yeah.
And we'll have a number of bits of analysis that we'll be putting out and based on what people told us and who voted which way.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a fascinating day and a half between now and 6 p.m. and into the evening tomorrow night. I'm sure all of us will keep watching. We've had 60 people stay on nearly 20 minutes overtime. So it's great to have had you here and to be able to share a really thorough breakdown of that data set, Paul. We're really so grateful to you for that. And I'm sure our audience are as well. And I'm certainly really grateful for that breakdown. I've been calling you and texting you from time to time when I've had other reports, just so you can sort of perhaps give me a clarified, an understanding of it. You're always an incredible, salient and erudite source of intelligence for me, certainly, and I'm sure for people who've been watching today. So thank you so much. Uh,
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day, and I'm sure you'll be head down checking those figures and all those things and recasting seats. So you're going to recast Fowler. Any others?
Just one or two that we kind of having a retweak on.
Yeah.
Our core projection is exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not going to change what we're thinking on. Well, I'm not a betting person. I'm not going to bet on the election. I do bet on Melbourne Cup, but that's the only thing I'd bet on. So, but I am not going to bet on this election. But obviously, this is really interesting in terms of being instructive for the people who've been watching today. So, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining us today and staying over time. And if you've got any questions that you would like to ask me or that we might be able to help with in the coming weeks and days, then please get in touch. Thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the day. Perhaps have a coffee or two, or whatever else that you may, whatever beverage, caffeinated or otherwise, and enjoy the next day and a half and the results and watching the coverage tomorrow night. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. I'll
Have a
catch you
great,
soon.
have a
Thank you
great
for
day.
having me. Sorry, I can't. It's like